Welcome, team. Firstly, thanks for joining us tonight. It's our first one of the year. It's good to get underway in 2023, and we're starting tonight with something I'm sure is at the forefront of a lot of people's minds. And if those of us who've been lucky enough to get amongst some pre-season footy already, will have experienced at the grassroots level. So tonight we'll be going through the global law trials introduced, a couple of global law trials introduced since last year, and which are now coming into play in our community season, and also New Zealand Rugby's experimental domestic safety law variations as well. Just a couple of things to help us through tonight. For those that don't know me, my name's Cam. I'm our referees manager. Anytime that you guys have a question, it's probably best that you just type it in the chat or just make a note of it. We'll try and address these as we go, as they come up, so that we can they're a bit more organic. However, what we don't want really is just a constant back and forth during the presentation. That way we can just create a good recorded resource out of this as well. So we'll definitely create opportunity for those. Just, if you can keep your microphones off, please, just while others are speaking, that would be great. Even if you're not saying anything, there's invariably background noise, and I'm sure that we're all pretty well versed with how distracting that can be on video calls now. And if you're really struggling with connection, either to hear or to see, turning off your own video can really help as well and can improve your quality of the connection. And as I said, we're recording this workshop, so we'll make it available at a later date, and should have it up online by the end of the week, along with our full complement of resources. So without further ado, we'll cover off what we're going to get through tonight. So we'll go through our purpose, and I want to unpack from you all as well what you want to get out of tonight too. We'll do a bit of an overview of what law trials and experimental laws are, talk about how they're applied to our grades here in the Bay of Plenty. We'll quickly go through the global law trials. There's not a lot to go through there, but we will touch on those. And then we will sink more into the experimental domestic safety law variations. For those of you who are here at this time last year, you would have remembered that this presentation had a lot more bullet points on it. So it's really great to see that we've been narrowed down a little bit more in what should hopefully be a much more settled year. But as you'll see tonight, there's a lot more purpose, I think, now, and a lot more guidance around where these laws are at, so which is really cool. But first of all, I'm just going to pop you into small groups, and it's going to be just a quick fire chat. The sole purpose of this is to just have a quick chat with each other. What do you already know about, particularly the experimental domestic safety laws? What do you want to know about them? What have you seen? What are you afraid about? What are you excited about? Just anything at all, really. Any questions you might have, or anything that you want covered off tonight, just have a quick chat as a group. Can I just ask that when you do get into your groups, please, that you just at least have someone who's going to be designated just to quickly report back, because I want to make sure that we cover off everything tonight too. And if we can't cover it off tonight, we'll make sure we find out the answer to it. So what we'll do, we'll just quickly go around and there were 3 groups, so just one person from each group. You'll need to unmute yourself first. So if someone could just go from the first group and just share back anything that came out of your group, please, that we should take note of. And it might be an idea to introduce yourself as well, so that we know who's talking.
Which group was the first group?
There we go, Graham, you're the first group. Fantastic, thank you.
Were we?
Well, you are now.
Okay, we never sorted out a speaker, but I'll volunteer.
Fantastic.
Most of the discussion centred around the consistency with the tackle below the sternum.
Okay, so it's consistency has been the main one with the tackle. Okay, yep. Cool. Awesome. Anything from the other 2 groups that's different?
I think Sam had about 6 bullet points he wanted to go through, so I'll just leave it with Sam.
Yeah, no, that's fair, and that's a good passing of the buck, actually.
Yeah, good pass. I think consistency is obviously a big one, but just what the difference really looks like between tackle height. Bryce had some good comments that when he was watching from the sideline, it didn't actually look that different. And I think from the 2.5 games that I've refereed, it's very similar in terms of the tackle height. And then I suppose the scrum and that, I mean, is quite similar to what we've been playing at lower levels anyway, and the break foot is what most teams do anyway. So I think it feels like a massive change, but I think our thing was when you're out there doing it or you're watching it from the sideline, it's probably not that massive, but as long as we're consistent on it.
Cool. Right, has anyone else got anything else burning that just popped to their head or they would like to add before we carry on? I'll give a 5 seconds of silence call. Well, unless Nico, you've been nominated by someone to speak on your group's behalf. If there's anything there.
Yeah, I was nominated. Sean brought up he refereed a team from the Waikato on the weekend and produced a bit of like different views on the tackle height and a little bit of miscommunication between potentially unions and different levels of rugby. So just a little bit of communication breakdown there. And we kind of labelled it, they haven't played it and we haven't refereed it a hell of a lot. So I think they're trying to get their head around it, and us as referees trying to find our triggers and pitches for it still.
Okay, cool. Thanks very much. Thanks very much, guys, for that, and hopefully you got to see a few familiar faces again and some new ones as well. Okay, so just for tonight, we'll cover off what global law trials and DSLVs are as well. But essentially, one of the purposes for tonight really is to get the information in front of us, get the application in front of us, have an opportunity just to ask some questions and really start to get our heads around it. It will be followed up in season as well with more practical training and development. So, but this really is the first time that, other than what we've just read on our own, the first time we're having a good conversation around our new laws. And as Sam said, there's actually not a whole lot of scary new stuff. It's just making sure that we're consistent, really. So just a bit of background, what the difference between law trials and DSLVs, EDSLVs. So global law trials themselves are set by World Rugby, and they're never introduced. So they were introduced last year. Of course, they come in effect this year in New Zealand with our community season, but they're never introduced in a men's World Cup year. And of course, they were quite limited in what was set last year as well. They don't really like to change things up too much usually. And they are applied across the world and added to the laws of the game. Interestingly enough, there's actually been a recommendation for all unions, or for as many unions as possible, to trial our tackle height EDSLV. So that's an interesting thing that's come out from World Rugby as well. And no doubt you would have heard a lot of media around England Rugby doing something similar, although their wording was slightly different, and that's where I think they got in trouble. So I think ours has probably been worded a bit better. So our EDSLVs are set by New Zealand Rugby, and of course with research and guidance as well, taken from either World Rugby and from our own internal feedback and investigations, and all based on usually good science and recommendations. And they really only apply in New Zealand, although, like I've said, there can be some similar ones overseas too. So in terms of application, our global law trials are applied at all secondary and senior rugby. And our, mostly because, and for this round at least they are, there's nothing that really affects down into our juniors. Our experimental domestic safety laws, really, in essence, they're for all grades. The only one notable thing is that the 1.5 metre push scrum one, which we'll go into tonight, is not applicable in senior Premier Rugby. And we're just getting clarification at the moment as to whether that includes Premier Women's or not. So we're waiting that from the competition gurus that be here in the Bay of Plenty Rugby. There are, of course, also many small breaks and secondary grades that already have a lot of these laws in place. So some of them just extend out of those, much like the 1.5 metre push already being in place at secondary school level. As far as designated Premier grades go in Bay of Plenty, this is just really a reminder as to what they are, particularly when it comes to game on applications. So not necessarily just to do with our law variations and law trials, but of course our Baywide Premier competition, our men's comp. Our first 15 Division 1 and 2, and our under 16 Premiership are our designated Premier comps. And Pat Ray has his hand up. Pat, you're on mute. I'm trying to figure out how to unmute you.
Did I put my hand up?
You did.
That was an accident. Lucky we're not in an auction.
Okay. Do you have anything to say? Do you have any further anything
No.
to add in terms of that? No. Okay. Cool.
No, I got no idea how I put my hand up too, just quietly.
No. Okay. That's a good thing we're not in an auction. Brilliant. Okay. You put your hand down now, Pat. Bryce, yes.
Cam, question. Are you saying that you have 3 grades of Premier Rugby that will have different rules than the rest of the rugby?
Only in terms of game on application. So in terms of a designated Premier grade for applying game on, the only grades that apply are Premier men's, our first 15 grades, and then under 16s Premiership. And so that whereas the EDSLVs are quite specific around the 1.5 meter push, and that's just for Premier adults. They can, it's not applicable there, which we'll go into, but yeah.
Yeah, thanks. So just a question, if you were playing Division 2 first 15, you couldn't play game on, is that what you're saying?
That's our understanding at the moment, yeah. And unless that's changed by the secondary school exam.
Thanks, mate.
Okay, cool, all good. Okay. Right, so we'll just jump into our global law trials first of all. So just a quick recap on 2022. So there were a number last year. You might familiarise yourself with some of these terms. Now, all of these have actually been adopted into full law. So you would have seen some communication from me probably around about August, September, thereabouts last year. And that was just essentially saying that these are now written into law. You will notice in the 2023 law book, those of you who have had a good go through it already, that no longer are these in their own little box. They are written properly into law in itself. There was a couple of little tweaks and edits, particularly around the goal line dropout law. That was just to clarify some certain scenarios, I guess. But the main thinking is that so long if the ball's put into that in goal area and it's made dead by the defenders, then it is a goal line dropout, and that's the essence of it. Of course, there are other scenarios as well, but that was what they tidied up with that. So you can find out exactly what the wording is just by having a look through the relevant sections in the World Rugby laws. Great. In terms of our global law trials for this season, so first up is the breakfoot. For anyone who's been watching Super Rugby, international test matches, for those keen people watching the setup of the scrum, they will notice the hooker's feet promoted and forward right up until the set call. So again, this is for a safety, from a safety aspect, to ensure that there is load going down into the ground through their foot and not completely into them and into their neck and back. So that's around that safety aspect for sure. So this is going to be something that it is applied at. There's no clarification on the application for this in terms of grades. So it's applied at all grades of rugby where there's contested scrums. Of course, it's up to us to help players into this, to help players achieve learning this law trial as well. So if you're getting younger grades, they may be very new to it, and it won't take much. So just if you could just have a think about it at the moment, just from your perspective, what are the kinds of things that you could do just to help get that compliance? How could you set it up? What kind of things could you say? Are there things that you could bring into your game? It's a little personal reflection you can do now, just to help setting up that breakfoot. So again, I certainly hope that once we're into the season, if we've been good at this as referees and coaches, and that we've been good at coaching this, that certainly once we're well into the way of the season, that we're seeing this on a scrum by scrum basis. But we will know that this will take a little bit of getting used to, just like Nico said. we're refereeing this for the first time, coaches are coaching it for the first time, and players are using it for the first time. So it's up to all of us really to make sure that we're all learning together. So just before, and just around, of course, the sanction is a free kick, but of course, referees can use your management skills to ensure that we're getting the right outcome first, and then we can go to our sanctions as needed. Does anyone have any comments or questions around what the break foot looks like or what it might be? Or comments to add? Cool. Has anyone had experiences with the break foot, either coaching it? I know we've got some coaches on the call tonight, or referees have. How have our experiences been in terms of actually applying it so far? For anyone that's keen to share. No, we've got 5 seconds of silence. Is where I called it. Okay. And our other global law trial doesn't actually affect us too much. A, at a community level, and B, and Bay of Plenty Rugby, because a lot of it was to do around water carriers and medics. Now, it did give some guidelines around technical zones, it formalised those as part of law, gave some guidance around how many medics and water carriers we have, where they're allowed to go, etc., etc. Now, a lot of that was already written to Bay of Plenty Rugby competition rules. So, in essence, nothing really has changed there. However, it did add an extra definition to these people as additional persons, and how they can, along with the other people in the technical zone, so being coaches and replacements, and how we can deal with those people and if they impact on the match. So again, it's a thing in the tool belt for referees to use. It's I guess something for teams to be aware of, that there can be a sanction imposed. So coaches. So again, it's around making sure that none of your additional persons, or people who aren't the playing 15, are interfering with the match. So when we talk about touching a live ball, that can mean a ball that's been kicked into touch, hasn't touched a person yet, but is still live and available to be taken as a quick throw. So anyone going and intentionally touching that ball to prevent a quick throw, that's the kind of thinking that we've got there. We have an ability now to sanction that action. That sanction is a penalty kick, and it's at the as that play would restart. And of course, if that's in touch, then it would start 15 meters. The mark would be 15 meters in from touch. Now, of course, there are moments where we would, again, just like anything, where we can use discretion, we can use other tools in our tool belt and other words and other management strategies. Moving to a penalty, again, would be something where it's really impacted the match. It has real relevance or impact on the game. So if there was a quick throw to be taken, and it was a real opportunity for a quick throw that could have really helped that team, and someone has done something intentionally, then that would be a good time to pull out that penalty, as that would certainly stamp that out. So just be thinking, referees, around, I was also around behaviour as well. So comments directed at match officials. Again, referees, I guess, have your thresholds, have your management strategies, but in essence, water carriers, medics, all other additional persons, coaches, should not be directing comments at a match official during the game, particularly if they're negative or critical decisions. So again, it allows that, gives that opportunity for a sanction if required, and that's after referees, we've exhausted our management strategies for dealing with that. So just have to think, coaches, around how we would then can help to control our technical zones, or what we could do to help intervene with our teammates. And referees, just think what kind of strategies and how you could avoid that escalation and de-escalate things before it becomes an issue. Bryce, do you want to say what you were typing there, or?
No.
No. Okay. Sorry. I just thought you were typing a comment. That's right. Cool. Does anyone have any questions around that, or anything to add? All right. Thanks, Bryce. Okay, cool. Right, that's our global law trials all done and dusted. So we'll kick into the juicy stuff now. It's our EDSLVs. So quick recap on our 2022 EDSLVs. We're not going to go through all of them, but we will highlight the ones that aren't there anymore and the ones that are still there. So the ones that have been reviewed and not continued are our Scrum reset after a collapse. So we had that nice little, we had that law where there was a Scrum collapse after the ball was put in. We didn't know whose fault it was. We didn't have another contested Scrum. We had a free kick or an uncontested Scrum. That's now gone. And the inability for players at secondary school level to jump for a high ball in the field of play, that's now gone as well. Three main ones have remained. There are a couple of others which are more technical around game field size and small blacks, but three main ones to be aware of have remained, and they've just changed with a bit of grade applications. So Scrum Push 1.5 meters, the offside at the scrum for the halfback, and the tackle height. Cool. So just to re-highlight and get the application back in front of us, just so we're all really clear. Of course, 1.5 meter push is already in play for secondary school rugby as an under-19 law. It's now all the way through senior rugby, except for Premier Men, Baywide Premier Men. So our Baywide Premier Comp is the only designated one for that. We will get clarity on the Premier Woman as to whether that will or not, and I'll come back to you on that. The tackle below the sternum, that is for all rugby, from the second that you start playing tackle rugby right up until right up to Premier grades in seniors. And halfback being offside at the scrum, so the offside line being the tunnel. Again, all rugby, so that's all the way through all the grades, including first 15, including senior Premier. So hopefully we have a really good picture of that, of which grades they're applied to now. So we'll sink into the detail of each of these laws. So the first one is hopefully something that's pretty familiar with a lot of us. I'd imagine that in terms of refereeing and coaching, that a lot of us have been through the secondary school grades and are aware of what scrum moving 1.5 meters looks like. Now, there's the one, I guess there was the one piece around this is that if it's a 5 meter scrum, that it can go further than that 1.5 meters. Of course, we invariably don't see many scrums actually get pushed more than 1.5 meters and stay together. But I guess it does allow the opportunity for a dominant scrum to result in a penalty try, because you would never be able to award that if it had to stop. So only for 5 meter scrums can they go more than 1.5 meters. So just thinking around some of the things that we would have done and already do, just around scrums, whether refereeing or coaching. How do we? What triggers do we have for referees? What triggers do we have for players as well? What are we listing out for? What the referees saying? Or what are we looking at? Is there someone that's designated within the pack just to pull things out or to stop the pack from moving? Communication within the pack itself. And it's something that's tricky, but that might be important if you're pushing too far very dominantly. So again, this is more of an awareness one. I think in terms of application that a lot of us are probably quite comfortable and understand that. However, I will open it up for comments or questions just around this, particularly from what we experienced last year when this was in play in some senior grades. Does anyone have any comments or questions just around this EDSLV? 5 golden seconds. No, fantastic. All right. Offside at the scrum. So again, this one is one that is very clear cut, a very simple law in terms of its application. It is again something that as coaches and referees we are familiar with at a JAB level, and was brought into some grades last year as well. So making sure that opposing halfback it does not go further than the tunnel of the scrum, both feet. This is great news for referees, and I know a lot of people have had some really positive feedback on this, because often that opposing halfback can be absolute pain at the back of the scrum. It does change the shape of the game. You do see it in Super Rugby as well. This is one of the game innovations, they call them, at Super Rugby level 2. And you do see a lot more 8-9 moves off the back of the scrum. So it has opened up that attacking weapon a lot more, which is, again, a lot more positive play, gets a lot more go forward for the attackers. But you also now see halfbacks now doing different things in terms of their defense as well. So just as a bit of a recap on law as to where the halfbacks can go and what they can do. So if they come up to the tunnel of the scrum, like in the picture there, like it's a little bit small on my screen, but I think it's the blue player is the defending halfback, unless I'm wrong. They can't go past the tunnel and they can't go further out than a metre from the scrum. So if they are staying up between the 8 feet and the tunnel, they have to stay within a metre of the scrum until the scrum's over. So that's what it means by near, being within a metre. What they got a couple of options. Once that ball is fed, they can retire to the number 8 feet, and there's a line that gets drawn right across the entire park. Their offside line then becomes the number 8 feet, and they can go anywhere along that line. They can't come forward of it again until the scrum's over. So, for example, they can't come behind the 8 feet and then go around the other side of the scrum, the tunnel. So once they go to the 8 feet, they've got to stay at the 8 feet or in that line across the park at least. And lastly, the other option for a halfback is actually not even to go to the scrum at all. They can start 5 metres back, but they've got to stay there. So I have seen that on a couple of occasions, but not very often. Usually when a team's a player down, that's when they'll do that, just so they're not, they've got an extra person out wide to defend. In terms of application for this or any questions around it, does anyone have anything they'd like to add or questions around how this is applied?
Yeah, thanks, Cam. That's perfect. That's the same way I applied it and do apply it. I got a question from Hamilton Marist in the weekend. They played at a Marist combined competition the week before, and so I'm not sure where that competition was, but the referees were ruling because in the I'll just read it from the experimental DSLV. It says that they must remain within 1 metre of the scrum, and the way I interpreted that is that they were just putting a 1 metre limit on the near from law 1930. So that would only apply if they were up next to it, but I took that to mean they were just really trying to clarify what near meant, but permanently retiring to the offside line or to the 8 foot didn't count in terms of the 1 metre. So I guess my view is exactly the same as yours, that if you're at number 8's feet, you can go as far as you want, but they were saying that some referees in some areas were doing a 1 metre like bubble if you were anywhere near the thing. So it might be worth, because I appreciate that these don't, get added to the law book like they do with global ones. So I suppose if we're all on the same page with what you said, and I completely agree with that, I feel like they've just added 1 metre rather than using near, but just keep as long as we're doing all the same.
Fully agree. And invariably, if these are accepted and if they're in their second year of trial, they probably are going to be accepted into full DSLV law. And they probably will be added to our DSLVs at some point, hopefully. And what I can do is I can feed that back to NZR just around that clarity of wording. So that's there, 100%. I think if we, like you said, Sam, if we're all on that same page, that's the intention of that law, is to just define what near means. Then I think we'll be good. So just for clarity again, guys, we'll just repeat that one more time. So that the 9, and I might even get out my little laser pointer here. There we go. So the 9 can, once that ball's fed, if he or she is starting at the scrum, they can stay near that scrum, so they can come out from the scrum up to a metre if they're between the 8 feet and the tunnel. So if they're in this zone, they've got a little like 8 metre, number 8s to the middle of the scrum and out the metre. That's their little box that they can stay in. Or they can retire to the 8 feet and go anywhere across the park, so long as it's not back in front of the 8 feet again until the scrum's over. Or they can retire permanently to the offside, to the 5 metre offside line. They've got 3 options there. So just for clarity, that's what near means, and that's what the 1 metre means. So that's good clarity, and thanks for pointing out, I guess, some real world application in other provinces there, Sam. Right. Anything else, guys, just on that, or any questions just around what we've covered there? No, cool. All right. Right, we'll dive into the tackle height. So, for those of us lucky enough to, again, this is the one that was really brought up when you guys were talking earlier about what you want to get out of tonight and what you want to understand. This was the hot topic, and I'm sure that it will be throughout a lot of the season as well. As it probably is the one thing that is going to be the biggest adjustment for players. Just for background, of course, this has always been law up until about under 13s. It was trialled at some secondary school grades last season, not many, and now it's but the sanction for that was a free kick. So now there's been clarity put forward right across the board, all community rugby, that the tackle height is now the sternum. So the sternum's a good piece of wording, and it's a little bit better than what England came out with a little while ago, and they called it around had to be below the waist. The sternum, as you can see on the picture, is at the bottom, essentially at the bottom of the chest. So if you're thinking that little zone where if you're feeling just below your chest, there's a sort of little divot in and around there. That is essentially where your sternum is. Nice little. If someone's got some more technical or practical ways to identify your sternum, feel free. But hopefully, by that picture and that description, we can figure out where that might be. Of course, that's good for knowing where it is. It's then a matter of actually refereeing that when we're encountering it on the field. So,
hey Cam.
Yes.
Pretty much the sternum is at the height of the nipples, right?
Little lower normally.
A little lower.
Yeah.
Okay. You must be different to me.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I've said to players, but that's probably not accurate then.
Yeah, it's like literally, it's pretty close though. It's pretty close, I guess. But I just sort of go. We just sort of go in that. I just sort of find that little divot in the bottom, just in that.
Oh, that. Yep.
Yeah.
I got it. Yep. All good.
Yeah, one of the coaches said to me, because I kind of said to them, "Oh, have you guys been training this?" And they said, "Yeah, we've just been training, hitting them in the soft spot." So basically, like where it goes from hard to soft. They're like, if you're hitting in the soft space, you're safe. So they're like, our whole thing's that like if you're hitting soft, you're safe. That's how you're doing it. That's correct, Pat. You wouldn't have a soft space, but most people do.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, they're spot on. Yeah, just in that soft area. So in terms of coaching, it's a really good sort of coaching technique. In fact, there's a lot of resources on Rugby Toolbox. They've like blasted Rugby Toolbox with a lot of tackle technique resources. So coaches out there, have a good look through. There's so many that really help to guide players into getting that tackle height right. This was bound to turn up some good banter. All right, so in terms of the second tackler though, so this is a good point of clarity for everyone, and something we need to get our heads around as well, is that high tackle line is just for the first tackler. So that person going in and initiating the tackle, that's just for them. Anyone that comes in and assists with that tackle, or is the second person into tackle, their high tackle line, their high tackle line is just as per old law. So it's the line of the shoulders. Rationale around that: a two-person tackle. Yes, yeah, two or more, I would say. The rationale around that is just to make sure that we're not always getting heads in the same space. So if you put two players in that same soft area, then you're putting two of their heads in the same spot. So it does allow that ability for the second or subsequent person to come through and tackle a bit higher.
So Cam, what if they're at the same time? What if you got two literally hitting at the same time?
Great question. Glad you asked. So if you're hitting at the same time, at least one of those people have to be below the sternum line, so they can't both go in high. So long as if you can't figure it out as to who was first, if you reckon they're both around about the same time, so long as you got someone below that sternum, then you're all good. Cool. So that's in terms of the actual law itself, and the application, of course, is going to be something that, for consistency, we're going to need to unpack a wee bit. So I'm just going to switch my screen over. Just stop sharing that. Painting. And I will share. I will put together this with other resources along with this recording, and I'll just share my screen again. So there we go. Okay, so sorry, I just had the Rugby toolbox up there. I'm not apologising for that actually. But again, the Rugby toolbox, please check it out. It's got a lot of great videos, a lot of great clarification, a lot of whys, a lot of extra words for you to unpack. It's got some coaching resources as well, tackling activities. And what I find really useful, and this is what I think will really help us with that consistency that that you all brought up before in terms of getting that, is the frequently asked questions. So if we go to those, it is the FAQs. They've centered them around the tackle, of course, because there weren't that many questions around the other two because they're quite clear cut. The tackle, though, there's not as much. So I'm not going to read from this because I'm sure that you're all intelligent people who can go in and read this. However, I will just point out a couple of quick things to bring up just as conversational, just as clarity points tonight. So the first thing that comes to mind, and this was the first thing that came to my mind as well, was what about the ball carrier? What about them and when they drop their body height just prior to contact? The good thing about this is that we got good clarity from this kind of situation a couple of years ago with the head contact process. It talked about mitigating actions, what is and what isn't foul play, and essentially that the application of that translates across to how we apply this EDSLV. So if a ball carrier, the thinking is that if a ball carrier comes in and dramatically changes their height just prior to contact, and a person was a tackler was in a low, good tackling position, ready to hit that soft spot, and they invariably hit a little bit higher than that soft spot and get them above the sternum, is that foul play? I would think that that there's a mitigating circumstance there, is that the ball carriers drop their height, therefore there's no foul play. So that's again a very situational type thing. But it is I guess the train of thought that really should go into the minds of the referees when they are when they're applying this. So when you're actually thinking about, we'll go a little bit lower. I'm going to use the goal line as the example. So goal line, of course, is when you invariably have the ball carrier going very low straight away to try and get the ball down to the ground. Again, the tackler should be making a good attempt to get underneath and use other tackle techniques, such as around the legs or up and underneath the torso and drive sideways. There are options for the tackler. It's not a complete impossibility, but let's not forget that the ball carrying team has actually earned their way to that goal line already. So it's then the skill of the defending team to then make legal tackles to stop them from scoring. Again, if it's a sudden drop in height and the person was in a good position to make a tackle, you use your judgment. Was there foul play? Wasn't there foul play? And you can go from there. However, any dangerous contact with the head or neck area, regardless of that, should be considered. So, if there is dangerous head contact, tacklers should anyway be avoiding that at all costs, and they put themselves in a position to be sanctioned. And of course, your level of sanction will then you can then use the head contact process, which we won't go into tonight in depth. So that's, I guess, the main mindset around the ball carrier's actions that I just want you guys to get your heads around. What is the ball carrier doing? Is it a sudden drop in height? What was the tackler in a good position to make a good tackle at that soft area and below? Or were they quite upright and then they've hit them high? That's your thinking, and that's where the whole was it foul play, was it not foul play? this document's fantastic. Again, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but it does pull up a lot of different scenarios. It talks about the tackler tackling the ball carrier from behind. But the one thing I will just cover off again as well is here is actually what is a tackle. So a lot of people will think, well, those particularly law-minded people will think, well, a tackle's only a tackle when the tackler goes to ground as well. So you can have I guess, contact from a would-be tackler, but no tackle completed by law. However, it doesn't necessarily mean to say that we can't rule on the contact itself. So, a couple of different scenarios. If a would-be tackler grabs the ball carrier by the jersey, above the line of the sternum, and they attempt to halt their progress. So if they do not bring the ball carrier to ground or stop their progress, so they're just a bit of an unsuccessful grab at them and they just kind of get the jersey, there's really, unless you can deem that there's real danger, then it's play on. They haven't really grabbed them. It's probably glancing. It's been on the jersey or just across the body, and unless you consider it to be dangerous, then play that on. There's no foul play, and it's not necessarily a high tackle. However, so if the ball carrier is held up or pulled to the ground, and the tackler does not go to the ground with the ball carrier, but they get them high above the sternum, so around the jersey, it's maybe swing them to the ground. Again, they're not actually, while they're not actually completing a tackle by law, it is high contact. So they need to be compliant with that tackle height. So if they're grabbing them, they make successful contact in terms of they can sling them to the ground from above their sternum, then that is a penalty kick in that sense, even though they may not have gone to ground with them. I know there's a lot of different scenarios you can think of here, and might take you a little while for everyone to get their heads around it, but I highly recommend have a really good read of these FAQs. Try and unpack and understand these scenarios, because they're real game scenarios and they happen all the time. So yeah. And of course, when ruling on anything, the height of the contact and nature of the contact should always come into play when we're determining sanctions. So of course, anything up around the head and the neck, we should really be thinking, is it dangerous? Is there a high or medium level of danger? Whether there's anything mitigating, and then think about your head contact process for those. Just trying to think out of here. No, I was just going to show you while I had the screen up as well. This had a couple of videos around the global law trials too. If you haven't checked them out already on the World Rugby website, under the law section, there's a global law trials button, and it's got shows a video of the breakfoot. As you can see there, the feet nice and forward at the setup. It also has got a really nice video of I think it was a water carrier or medic being dealt with for intentionally touching the ball when it was a quick throw was about to be taken. So this was quite good. This was quite good because this video was taken before the law was even, I guess, made a trial. So it was good. It was actually good management from the referee. So it was good. Anyway, check out the toolbox, check out the videos, check out the FAQs. That's going to provide us some real good clarity for all those different situations. So definitely. Yeah, so on that, I think rather than me explaining it to death in about 16,000 different ways, you've all had an opportunity now to, I guess, think about the tackle height, what it means, some of the different situations, scenarios. Is there any questions that anyone has around tackle height, or that they want to bring up, or have they noticed so far in games they've refereed? Or coaches, I know I've got a couple of coaches on the line. Is there anything that your players are struggling with, or any clarity that you want from referees in terms of application? Cool. I'll probably just tell personal story. So I was refereeing Kahukura and Marist St Michael's in the weekend. And for anyone who knows the fixture between those two clubs, there's no love lost in a banner game there. No, but certainly So that was my first senior game this year, refereeing the tackle height, and it was certainly a challenge. It was quite a challenge for a lot of those players, even after a couple of warnings, trying to work with them and trying to be quite vocal on the field. I think that's the key, is that the referees will have to find that balance between working with the players and being vocal and trying to be preventative as much as possible, but also drawing a line and actually sanctioning as well. Because at the end of the day, if you're doing nothing about it and you think, oh, I'll just have to let that one go, let that one go, I might get the fifth one now. Or if you say, oh, I'm not really ruling on that today, you're not doing yourself any favors, you're not doing the team any favors, and you're definitely throwing the next referee completely under the bus, who comes along and then is refereeing the way that they are supposed to be. So find that happy little middle ground. It's easier said than done, of not ruining the game, not blowing it to pieces. Really dig deep into that chest of management strategies. I'm not gonna lie, I probably took a lot more lenience in terms of repeated infringements for the high tackles. I definitely had it was probably 5 or 6 per team. I did before I got to a card eventually for one of the teams. But there's in context of that, they also had a lot of combinations. There are a few combinations of other high tackles, like around the head and neck area. So they would have been high tackles last year. So find that happy middle ground, use your management strategies, work with the teams, but at the same time, together as referees, as a referees group, we have to hold our standards. We've got to put our standards out there. The earlier the better. The sooner we can get resultant change from the players, the better, because there's no point starting to go hard on this halfway or near the end of the season. That's just going to be good for no one. So that's probably all I have really to say around that. If anyone's got any other pearls of wisdom to add to that, because I know that a few of you guys have been up there refereeing rugby already. Any experiences?
Yeah, I got a couple from my game on the weekend, Cam. I had Judy and Rangatawa, the Rose Bowl game on the weekend, and been quite a hearty game of Māori club rugby, and at a pretty decent crowd who were quite revved up right from the word go. With your leniency that you mentioned of not calling it or starting at the 5th or 6th one you see, kind of wasn't going to work for me. So hit it early, and the ones that were clear and obvious. So focused on the one-on-one tackles that were front on, pretty clear and obvious action on both the ball carrier and the tackler, and then followed quite overly explained signals. So really over-exaggerated the high tackle signal, but more importantly, aimed it at the sternum and made it clear and obvious. So I think that kind of got a bit more buy-in from the crowd, because when they see it, or even when players get hit sternum high now, initially the reaction isn't, I have got my head taken off. So there's not really a massive potential for escalation, because they don't register that as a high tackle. So, I mean, if we kind of muck around and let those ones go, then later on in the season, like you said, we'll throw our mates under the bus by not whacking it, and that a sternum high tackle in 5 or 6 rounds time could start a fight. So standards early, I suppose. That was my learning from it.
No, 100%. And you touched on a good thing there. I actually really like that, Nico, around the just the exaggeration, I guess, with the secondary signal. But it's not just selling it to the players, but I've had this conversation with a few people, and I know that some coaches we have on the line here, selling it to the rugby public is another thing. So the more that we can do to get the message out there, to educate the people that are standing on the sidelines, because a lot of the players are going to start knowing pretty quickly. They're already being coached. We're already refereeing it. Coaches, I mean, the people who are in the game will know it pretty quick. It's the people who rock up on a Saturday or a Friday night or Monday afternoon or whatever and start watching and go, well, hang on, why is he called that a high tackle? Because that was just around there, like that's ridiculous. So anything that we can do to educate our rugby public is massive, and we're all responsible for that. So get the word out. Work with your local clubs and schools. If you're a referee, get stuck in there. Just talk to people, ask them about, hey, what do you reckon about these new EDSLVs? And they might just say, what EDSLVs or what tackle height law? A good opportunity, good in for you then to explain it, and be that guy or girl. No, it comes from everyone. We'll just have to really educate the rugby public to make our rugby environment really positive. All good. Any last opportunities, guys, for questions, just from anything from tonight or moving forward with specifically EDSLVs and global law trials into the season? Or it doesn't have to be a question, it could be a comment. No, cool. As promised, I've recorded this tonight. I'll clip the recording and pop it up online. Should be up there by the end of the week. I'll also build it into a web page as well, like I did last year, along with all the links and great application table and everything that you were going to need, I guess, to get underway with applying these laws and using these laws and understanding these laws. It's probably going to take a bit of in-game practice to get consistency, to feel it out, to know what we're looking at in terms of refereeing. Coaches, of course, it's going to take a bit of week-to-week stuff with your players. What are we seeing from referees? How are they ruling on it? Where do we need to go? How can we get better in terms of that first tackler? And what opportunities does it present for the second tackler coming in too? So just like any laws, the game changes once people start adapting to it. So already we've seen that with the halfback offside law. No doubt we'll see that with the tackle height law too. Players adapt, the game changes, and then it's just the non-stop evolution of rugby. So thank you all so much for your attendance tonight. Really appreciate it and your engagement.